And then you were also saying Safra Katz, who's the CEO. Obviously, she's having a good day, but she could have had a lot more if she did not sell.
Cars are about to get more expensive in the U.S. Some may even be pulled from the market entirely.
If we see prices going up as a result of costs going up either on vehicles or parts, that means that the consumer is going to have a harder time affording these vehicles.
Cadillac, once a gleaming symbol of American prestige and the promise of the open road, is now staring at the unthinkable, walking away from its own homeland. The brand that once defined luxury and power finds itself cornered by Washington's tariff war, forced to contemplate an exit strategy that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. The 25% tariff has turned Cadillac from a national icon into a survival liability, strangling margins and reshaping boardroom conversations. Even the Escalade, the flagship SUV that once stood as an untouchable American success, no longer has a secure future in Texas. Electric assembly lines, once touted as Cadillac's gateway to tomorrow, are stalling under the weight of collapsing incentives and mounting costs. It all boils down to one brutal choice: remain in America and keep bleeding profits, or shift production elsewhere in search of stability. But if Cadillac, with its century-old brand and deep roots, is questioning its place in the United States, what does that say about the future of the entire American auto industry?
We go toward robots and you go toward more and more bots, especially in this AI world. That's something that the only true way in terms of identification is going to be iris scan. Now, I believe more and more tech platforms are ultimately going to adopt this, and that's why we're doing this now.
It spills directly onto American driveways. The same tariffs that pushed the company toward the exit have also turned owning a Cadillac into a financial burden for its most loyal customer. Since April 3rd, 2025, the 25% tariff has inflated the cost of imported vehicles. And
what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%. And basically, as you know, and as you've been seeing, not reporting as accurately as it should be reported because it's a massive story.
Models like the CT4 and CT5, with nearly half their parts sourced from Mexico, now carry hidden price tags born out of political battle. Even the Escalade EV, dependent on 30% of its components from South Korea, is caught in the crossfire. The result: sticker shock on the showroom floor. The Escalade, once marketed as the ultimate American luxury SUV, has climbed to $93,950, nearly $4,000 more than last year. For many families, what was once a dream purchase has suddenly become unreachable. And if tariffs remain in place, how many more households will be priced out of the American dream on wheels? Still with us? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. If the price shock rattled Cadillac's customers, the collapse of its electric ambitions has shaken the very foundation of the brand. What was once pitched as Cadillac's salvation, a pivot to electric vehicles that could secure relevance in a changing market, has now become a case study in failure. By December 2025, General Motors made the stunning decision to halt production of the Lyriq and Vistique at its Tennessee plant. Less than a year into what was supposed to be Cadillac's bold EV chapter, assembly lines went quiet and the trouble only deepened. During the first 5 months of 2026, one entire production shift was scrapped, cutting capacity and sending output into a tailspin. For workers, it wasn't just a lost paycheck. It was a sign that the future they had been promised was evaporating. The policy environment only accelerated the decline. The Trump administration's rollback of the $7,500 federal tax credit for EV buyers effectively pulled the rug out from under Cadillac. With that incentive gone, consumer enthusiasm collapsed, sales dried up, and the vehicles that were meant to carry Cadillac into the next era began gathering dust in showroom. Infrastructure failures made matters worse. Charging networks remained patchy and unreliable, leaving many potential customers skeptical about committing to an EV. Cadillac's bet on electrification, once hailed as its most daring play in decades, now looks like a gamble that backfired spectacularly. Instead of reviving the brand, it drained billions in investment and pushed Cadillac closer to an existential crisis. And so the question lingers: if even Cadillac cannot find its footing in America's electric future, what hope is there for the rest of the U.S. auto industry to compete on the global stage. Even Cadillac's crown jewel has not been spared. The Escalade, long the embodiment of American excess and success, is packing up its legacy in Texas and heading north. By 2027, production will leave the GM plant in Arlington, a facility that once symbolized stability, and shift back to Michigan as part of a $4 billion investment in gas-powered SUVs and pickups. On paper, the move looks strategic. By consolidating production in Michigan, GM can cut costs and insulate itself from some of the tariff shocks that have ravaged its supply chains. Yet, beneath the surface, the decision reveals a deeper compromise. The Escalade EV, with 30% of its parts sourced from South Korea, was especially vulnerable to the tariff net. Rather than doubling down on electrification, Cadillac has chosen the safer route. Lean harder into gasoline models that are less exposed to international supply chains. But this is not just a logistical adjustment, it's a signal. Cadillac is prioritizing short-term profitability over long-term innovation, retreating into familiar territory while the rest of the global auto industry races ahead on electrification. For Texas, the loss is more than economic. It's symbolic. Arlington's pride is Michigan's gain, but the trade-off underscores how fragile America's industrial geography has become under the weight of political choices. What does it say about the U.S. auto future when the very symbol of Cadillac's resilience, the Escalade, has to abandon Texas just to survive? The fallout is not confined to the showroom or the factory floor. It's reaching straight into the homes of thousands of American families. In Arlington, Texas, the GM plant that employs more than 5,000 workers is suddenly standing on unstable ground. For decades, that facility has been a lifeline for the city, a place where generations built not just cars, but middle-class livelihoods. Now, that security hangs by a thread. The mayor of Arlington has already sounded the alarm, warning that these tariffs amount to nothing less than a job-killing policy. His words carry the weight of anxious communities that can see the writing on the wall. Cadillac's shrinking output, coupled with the relocation of the Escalade, puts thousands of paychecks at risk. And the problem doesn't stop with line workers. It ripples outward to suppliers, truck drivers, diners, and shops that depend on steady wages flowing through the local economy. Even General Motors' own leadership has admitted the danger. The company's CFO has warned that if tariffs remain in place, moving operations out of Arlington will be more a necessity than a choice. At the same time, Cadillac's retreat from electric vehicles erases not just cars from production lines, but also thousands of high-tech jobs that were supposed to secure America's place in the global EV race. It's a brutal irony. A policy designed to protect American workers is instead dismantling their livelihoods piece by piece, leaving whole communities to wonder how much longer they can weather the storm. What was once a proud hallmark of North American cooperation has now become Cadillac's greatest weakness. For over half a century, the auto industry thrived on an integrated supply chain spanning the US, Canada, and Mexico. It was efficient and cost-effective until tariffs turned that strength into a liability. Take Cadillac's lineup. The CT4 and CT5 sourced nearly half their components from Mexico. The XT5 and XT6 about 35%, and the XT4 around 25%. Under normal conditions, this kept costs competitive. Now, every imported bolt or chip has become a tax burden and Cadillac can't escape. Experts call the process of tracing and taxing each part a nightmare, a bureaucratic maze that inflates cost while doing little to save American jobs. Some even call it madness, punishing the very system that once gave us automakers their edge. Trapped between politics and economics, Cadillac faces a losing battle. Follow the rules and profits bleed away. Resist and the risks multiply. Either way, its global competitiveness erodes, forcing the brand to confront a painful reality. Has Made in America become a curse instead of a promise? Faced with mounting pressure, General Motors has chosen what looks like the safest path forward, but in reality it may be the most dangerous. Instead of doubling down on electrification, GM is pouring $4 billion into gas-powered SUVs and pickups, betting that short-term stability will outweigh long-term risks. For Cadillac, this means leaning back into vehicles like the Escalade rather than staking its future on EV innovation. On the surface, the strategy makes sense. Gasoline Models A are less exposed to tariffs, easier to sell in the American heartland, and faster to turn into profits. But the deeper consequence is clear. Cadillac is drifting further away from the global automotive current. While Europe and Asia sprint toward electrification and carbon-neutral policies, Cadillac is locking itself into a path that may soon look obsolete. The risks of this inward turn are compounded by Cadillac's dependence on the U.S. market. By tethering its fate so tightly to American demand, GM leaves the brand dangerously vulnerable to political turbulence. A single tariff announcement from Washington can now upend years of planning, wiping out profits overnight and destabilizing entire communities. So the dilemma sharpened. Does Cadillac cling to the U.S. market and hope policy swings in its favor? Or does it take the bold, unsettling step of moving production offshore to safeguard its survival? The choice may decide whether Cadillac remains a player in the global industry or becomes another cautionary tale of American decline. The fall of Cadillac would not simply mark the decline of one brand. It would echo as a warning across the entire American auto industry. What began as a proud emblem of luxury and power is now reduced to a symbol of how protectionism can backfire. Instead of securing jobs and industry, tariffs have turned Cadillac into the face of a policy failure. The shockwaves stretch far beyond Detroit. From Texas to California, communities tied to auto manufacturing are feeling the tremors, and confidence in America's industrial backbone is beginning to fracture. Meanwhile, Canada, Mexico, and even Europe stand ready to capture the opportunities created by America's self-inflicted wounds, offering stability where U.S. policies have created chaos. And so the question remains, if Cadillac, a century-old nameplate with global recognition, cannot survive under America's new trade regime, what hope is left for other U.S. automakers still caught in the same storm? This isn't just about cars. It's about the future of American industry itself. Will policymakers continue down a path that drives iconic brands away? Or will they finally recognize the cost of these decisions before it's too late? If this video gave you something to think about, like and subscribe to support more content like this.